everyone. Welcome to session 5 of the Footprints Administration Ideas, Tricks, and Hacks webinar series. For those of you who are attending for the first time, welcome. For those of you returning, welcome back. We do these series once a month, usually on the second Wednesday of the month. All prior sessions get recorded and uploaded to our website where you view prior sessions. Today's session, we're going to focus sort of at, as usual, I like to go through about 5 different feature requests at the start. Those are ideas on the BMC Communities page. And then today we're going to cover 3 topics: working with broadcasts, dealing with UI and console customizations, and types of business rules. With most of the focus going to be on broadcast. Types of business rules going to be a quick, easy one. My name is Nick Room. I'm a senior ITSM consultant with RGR Innovations, a partner of BMC. We've been a partner of BMC since 2004 and working with Footprints since BMC's acquisition of Numera in 2012. A little bit about RGR there, so I guess I kind of covered the main points. We do A to Z implementation, so from discovery, scoping, implementation, training, and all the way to support after the fact. My contact information is on that first slide there, so if ever you have any questions or whatnot, you can absolutely feel free to reach out. All right, so last time on session 4, so a quick recap of what we talked about last month. So you can see the ideas that we highlighted there. If you're interested, you can look at the session 4 recording available at rginnovations.com/webinars, and you can hear more about everything that's on here essentially. Probably the highlight was modifying the default system portal, because by default that is locked and you are unable to edit it, so you can't do things like add extra consoles to it, make the administration console the default so that you don't have to keep flipping from home, changing the theme, adding your logo and things of that nature. And then next month's webinar is going to be on, I believe it's going to be April 12th, the second Wednesday there, and essentially this is going to be the topics we're going to cover on that session. So probably the highlight in this one here is going to be introduction to custom portal themes. So sort of following the theme that I had started on last month's session of introduction to custom SQL coding. Understand this is customization, not configuration, but it does give you a little bit of extra power because as some of you may or may not know, you can't really modify portals all that much. You can choose from a preset list of themes that just basically changes the highlight color of the theme. But of course, all those themes are just CSS files. So we're going to have a brief intro on how to customize those on next month's session. So without further ado, we'll get started on the topics for this session here. So we're going to start with the ideas highlights. So these are the ideas that I've picked to talk about on this session here. I will copy paste those URLs into the chat so that you guys can grab them from there. And then this is on the BMC community website, so you need to have an account. I would imagine most people on this webinar probably do have accounts. We're kind of targeting Footprints administrators. And of course, you do need to have an account on the BMC site to be able to download Footprints. So you'd use the same account to vote up those ideas if you like them, or if you really don't like them, vote down, or just ignore them. So we'll start with change management voter delegation. I'm just going to switch over to here. So this is the idea for this one here, and essentially what this comes down to is when you're using the approval engine in Footprints. You can dictate who the approver is going to be, and you can either hard code the approver, as an individual user. You can make it a team, and therefore the approvers would be the members of the team. You can even make it dynamic based on values on the form. Dynamic, use this assignee field or use this contact link control, things of that nature. But once the approval process starts for that particular ticket, whoever the approver is that was designated that's who has to approve it. There's no way to delegate that approval. So if the approval went out and, oh, well, that person is now on vacation for a week, you either have to build in some kind of a backup mechanism in your design, which is pretty standard, or you have to have an administrator bypass the approval, or a change manager. But there's no way to do a delegation to say, hey, yeah, I'm off for the week here. I'm forwarding it off to Joe so Joe can take care of it on my behalf. So that's what this feature request here is for. Next one up, make footprints fully translatable. This is one that I've kind of spearheaded, but of course, unless you're really using footprints in multiple languages at the same time, this is really going to be a non-issue. So I suspect for most of you guys, this is going to be a non-issue. Of course, you can use footprints in pretty much any language that you want, but if you want to use it in multiple languages at the same time, that's where things start to get a little bit tricky, because there are certain elements of footprints that you can translate. The names of fields, the labels on your form, email templates, things like that. But then there's other elements that you cannot translate, like consoles, values and drop downs, which would include like your category tree. So the workaround essentially there, and for those of you that use the Footprints Advanced Starter template, you'll kind of see, we have duplicate consoles and portals and system roles, one for English and one for French. So if you want to use it in multiple languages, you'll have to duplicate that effort. And it works, it gets the job done, but it's not ideal. So this feature request is really about making every facet of footprints translatable. Next one, so business rule criteria on field change for assignment fields. So whenever you're building a business rule and you're configuring your criteria, you can do things, and this would be for after save rules. You can do things like, hey, if this drop down changed from this value to this value. So for example, if the status changed from open to closed, I can build that as a criteria. However, you cannot use the changed attribute when using assignee fields. It hasn't been a big issue for the most part, because again, we can kind of adapt to this limitation in our design. But it can be handy, such as, hey, I just added Layla to the assignees field. I'd like her to get a special notification saying, hey, you've just been assigned to this ticket. We can't really do that because we don't have the changed attribute. So what we just do is we just say, hey, well, when it's saved, when the ticket is saved, send an update email to the assignees. And now Layla will get an email just saying, ticket 123 was updated. As opposed to something a little bit better on a change. Next one up, I have this one open up twice. Interesting. So I must have missed one. Give me one quick second here. Which one did I miss? Oh, I copied it twice. All righty. That's a little oopsie on my part. I just opened those up. I should have checked that a little bit better. And there's the issue. I copied them incorrectly in here. Okay, so I will dig up the link for this one here after the session and then share it with you guys. But I'll talk briefly about this one. Being able to transfer personal reports and searches. So in Footprints, when you create a saved search or a report, you have the option to either make it private or shared. Private means it is private only to you and no one else can see it, not even an administrator. And shared means it's shared with everyone. And while that's not ideal, it does work, but it does cause problems where administrators become unaware of what their agent users are doing. So if you are in an environment where you encourage your agent users to create their own saved searches and customize their UI and things like that, things get a little bit out of hand with people creating numerous saved searches. And as the administrator, you have no idea what's going on, because when you're looking at it in the UI, you only see things that are shared. Of course, if you go look into the database, you can see everything. And I might try to segue a little bit on this later because I did custom design something in the UI to address this shortcoming. So a little bit later, I'll try to show you guys that. All right, so back to here. And then the last one, automatically creating a calendar appointment from a date time field. So the functionality exists today on a date time field. You can create an appointment, but it's a manual process. You have to click on your date time field, click the create appointment button, fill in the appointment, and hit save. So this is really about making it accessible via business logic. So anything to do with the calendar in FootPrints is not accessible to any of the business logic, business rules, essentially. That said, again, for those of you on the FootPrints Event Starter template, one of the things that we did there is we did some custom development to essentially meet this feature request. So now we would have it where when you put your start date and your end date and you hit save, it automatically creates the calendar appointment under those dates. And then if you ever move those dates around and hit save, it updates the calendar. If any of you guys are interested, unfortunately, I don't have time to show you that today. I might have covered it in one of my previous webinars. I don't remember now, but if any of you guys are interested on that, feel free to reach out to me. Definitely can show you more on that. I do also have a few posts on the BMC community on that topic as well. So that's it for the feature requests. What I'll do now, just before I forget, I will drop those URLs into the chat for you guys. There's only going to be 4 here because I noticed, one of those was a duplicate. So I'll have to get you that one later. But there they are. Oops, everyone, post them here. Okay. All right. So we're going to go on to sort of our first topic of discussion, which is broadcasts, working with broadcasts. So this has been a recent topic which I've enjoyed, because historically with broadcasts and FootPrints, I've actually recommended not using them when working with clients. And now that's changed a little bit. And the reason actually, let me take a step back before I kind of even explain like why, let's explain what a broadcast is. So I have a business rule here configured to send out a broadcast. So this is using an after save business rule, very simple trigger and criteria. And then the action is sending out a broadcast. Now, when you send out the broadcast, you can either have it as simple text, where you then type in whatever text you want. And of course, you can use variables. You can also configure it to use an email template, one of your existing email templates. Generally speaking, you'll be using some text. Now, what this will do when I create an incident ticket and the type of incident is equal to major incident, it will do this broadcast. So if I'm going to switch over here to Firefox, where I've got a brand new ticket ready to go. So when I hit save on this, it takes a couple seconds after the save, for the logic to come up, but you'll see I'm going to get a pop-up on the screen here, which is what my broadcast is. So this is a very useful way of alerting your agents of something that's happened based on whatever the criteria is in your rule and whatever the text is. So in this case, I'm using this broadcast functionality to display a message to the logged in users about a major incident. So the way this is configured, and you can see here now I'm back as my administrator, I get it as well. I'm just going to X out of it for a sec here. It's going to pop up again, but just to go here. So when I configure the broadcast, essentially the only configurable parameter outside of obviously the trigger and criteria is this drop down over here that says who are going to be the recipients of the broadcasts. Now, this is in the context of the container that I'm in, right? This is for the service desk container. So, I'm just going to do read. So long as I keep pressing X, it's going to keep popping back up because I haven't actually acknowledged it. That's why it keeps coming back up. But essentially, I can send it to all my users, only the ones that have an agent role, only the ones who have a customer role, only the ones who have an administrator role. Again, in the context of the workspace, not of the system. If I don't even have a role into this workspace, then the broadcast won't show up at all for me. Okay, so that's how broadcasts work. So they're very useful for things like this. You could even use them in the context of, hey, we have to take the system down over lunch to do an emergency change or something like that. You could leverage broadcasts for that so that everyone who's logged into the system gets this pop-up. Now in comes the lesser desirable features of functionalities of this feature. So I've got 2 users here who are logged into the system getting this pop-up. And that's great. That's what it's supposed to be. I have a 3rd user here that is not logged into the system when the pop-up was generated, right? This was generated 2 minutes ago. So when this person logs in, when this person logs in, they will also get the pop-up. There it is. So even though they were not logged into the system when the broadcast was triggered, they get the pop-up. Now, depending on your use case, that could be a good thing or a bad thing. Based on the sort of the traditional use case, that might be a less than ideal thing. But it is what it is. Where the problem can kind of come in is I've logged in 2 minutes later. If I logged in the next day or a week from now, I would still get the broadcast. So that's where some of the downsides of this functionality are, and why historically to the clients I've worked with, I've always recommended not using it, is because the confusion that's brought about when you log in, you come back from vacation for a week, you log in and you have 1, 2, 3 or more broadcasts that are no longer relevant because they happened a week ago, but you hadn't logged in since, so now you're getting them. That also extrapolates further by, if I go in as my administrator user, now I'm just going to acknowledge this because I don't want this to keep popping up here. I'm going to create a new user. So I'm creating a new user here that doesn't even exist in the system. So I'm going to create this person. Now this person does have the the agent access to the service desk container. So they are in scope of that broadcast. So now if they log in to the system, do that quick enough, log out. Now, if that person logs into the system, even though they didn't even exist when that broadcast was triggered, they will get the broadcast. And in fact, here you can see they've now received 2 broadcasts because I did test this earlier today. So those are the big drawbacks to this feature that makes it kind of hard to recommend using. Now, that said, I'm teaching you guys about broadcasts today because recently we've been asked by some of our clients, hey, we're not really sure what broadcasts are. Can you talk to us about it? So this is going to serve as a little bit of an intro to what broadcasts are. Now, of course, I've enumerated these problems. We have a solution for that. So that solution has involved a little bit of custom development. For those of you guys new on our webinars today, don't be afraid by that. We do some of this stuff pretty much often throughout the system. So what I have designed, I'm going to switch back over to Chrome here where I'm logged as my administrator. As part of the FootPrints Advanced Starter template, we have an additional administration console that we've thrown on. It's got some things in here, notably broadcasts. So here I can see what broadcasts exist and sort of their information. So I can see here's the broadcast that was created. This was that last one there. And I can see users notified, essentially who has acknowledged the broadcast. So for now, only the administrator user has, right? These 2 people have not acknowledged it because it's still on their screen, right? Just Xing out, like I said, doesn't acknowledge it. It'll come back in a couple seconds. So here I'm logged in as Roy. When it comes back up, I'm going to say read and close. So now it doesn't show up on my screen anymore. If I come over here and refresh this, I can see that now Roy has also been notified. So now the system knows not to notify him. Because essentially what's happening is in SQL, it is tracking that in the database. So there's RGR that got notified. There's Roy that got notified. So each time someone who's in scope acknowledges it, there's a row that gets added to the database for this. And that's how the footprint system knows, well, if there's no row for this user, right? So new guy over here, if I just X out of it, it's going to get another one because there's no row in the database for it. So what I've done along with that feature, you can see, I keep Xing out, it keeps coming back. If I go back over here to this broadcast view that, essentially what I've created here in the Footprints Advanced Starter template, there is a quote unquote special container called Footprints Administration, where I basically have items for various Footprints administrative tasks. So one of those is broadcasts. It's got its own form and whatnot. And I do have some custom code that populates it. So now if I take this one over here, and you can see if I go back to new guy again, it came back, right? So now if I go here, I can now delete this broadcast. Now that broadcast is gone. And in the database, it's also gone. And so now when new guy X out of it, it's not going to come back. Okay, the first one comes back. This is the earlier one, right? This is the one over here, which I did not delete, C1035. So he still gets that one. Now, if I were to delete that one as well, then he won't get that one. So we've built that functionality in to basically now encourage people to use broadcasts, because there's definitely a use case for them. But now we've got rid of the downsides. Now we give the administrator complete visibility and control to what broadcasts exist. And because this is an item that we've created, right? If I go to my administration here, my workspaces, right? There's that Footprints administration container. There's the broadcast item. Nothing overly special, right? It's got a web form. Pretty much all the fields are read-only because I'm populating them with some custom code. But essentially, you could come in here, build yourself a business rule, and say something like time-based rule, check every day if the broadcast is older than 1 day, automatically delete it. And then that way you can make sure that your broadcasts never go out for more than that 1 day. So hopefully that gives you a good understanding to what broadcasts are if you didn't know already, or if you are already aware of them. You kind of see the power in being able to control them a little bit better this way. This is a new feature that we've brought into the Footprints Advanced Starter template. If you're interested in it, again, my contact info at the beginning there, or you'll have it in the survey that goes out after the broadcast. Feel free to reach out to us, and we can work with you guys to essentially implement this into your environments. Okay, so the next topic for today is dealing with UI and console customizations. So similar to broadcasts here, you may or may not be aware of, if I take let's go to Roy here, right? Normally there'd be a customize button over here. Now again, with the Footprints Advanced Starter template, and the latest versions of Footprints. In one of the latest versions of Footprints, you can now control who has access to customize or not. So if I go to my administrator here and I go into a portal, service desk agent, I can, oh, no, sorry, it's not here. It is in the system role. System role. So if I go into a system role now, facilities agent here, I can now dictate whether people are able to customize or not, right? So this is a new column. This came out in the last year or so. So, if you've been keeping up with your Footprints updates and you're within the last year or so, you will have this. If you're on a version that's older and you want this, then you'll have to upgrade. And what that does is at the system role level, you now have this column that shows up. And if you remove the checkbox, which I did everywhere, it removes the customize button for users that have that system role. Now, of course, customizing the console was only available to agents to begin with, but the way I like to implement software is I don't want agent users to customize their UI, because I want us to design a UI that will work for everyone or as best as possible, and not have every individual person, customize themselves into a rabbit hole, then have to reach out to you as the administrator to dig them out. But you can customize a UI, a console here, and add changes to it. Now, the only user I have in my system right now that can customize the administrator. So I'm going to go ahead and customize this console over here. So I'm just going to do things like I'm going to remove this button here, and remove that button, and remove that button, and even remove this view here, which will lock me out of being able to administrate my system. Sure. So now that's customized. So if I log out and log back in, I won't have any of that, right? I've customized it. Now, if you've customized a console, and an easy way sometimes to tell if a user has customized their console or not is if you click on the customize button again, if you see the restore button, that means they've customized their console. And if you hit restore, it reverts it back to what it should have been. Now, how that's tracked in the database is in the console table. So I'm just going to flip this one here. So I have a list of all my consoles in the system. But then down over here, I have this row over here that's a little bit different. It's got data in these last two columns here. Anytime you see data in these last two columns here, that tells you this is a customized console. So I can see source console. This is telling me what the source console was, which is console number 1, administration, and who the user is, which this goes to the app user table right up here a little bit, this table over here. And I know that user 1 is my administrator user. If I hit that restore button up here, basically all it's doing is deleting this row in the database. And of course, if you want to bulk restore all of your users, you just come into this table. If you're going to be playing around in the database, I don't discourage you guys from playing around in the database, but always take a backup first. And essentially all you have to do is delete all the rows where these two columns have data or not. Similar concept happens for other aspects of the UI. So for example, if I go to Team Open Work here, my open work. So here I can do things like this title column is too small. I want to see things a little bit more. The moment I do something like this is considered a UI customization. Now, don't be afraid of like, oh my God, this customization that's bad. It's just sort of like the terminology they use for the database table. And so what happens here is the next time I log in as Roy, it's going to remember that I made the title column wider. Now, it's not doing that with cookies, so it's not locked to a particular browser. It's doing that by an entry in the database. So again, we go back to the database. This is the table over here. If I were to run this one here, it's the last one I made, so I know it's this one over here. So app user 261, that's going to be Roy. Advanced search number 301, that's going to be that search there. And then essentially this column here stores what the final result is going to be, which was making title wider. Now, this was a little bit more of an issue on older versions of FootPrints about a year ago and more, but things have improved that it's not so much an issue anymore. But where this would cause an issue is the moment I did something as trivial as making a column wider. Now, if the administrator made a change to this saved search and added new fields, I wouldn't see them. And then, there'd probably be some head scratching going on between the agent user and the administrator. Maybe you contact your support, and then eventually you find out, oh yeah, they made a customization to their UI. You have to come in here and blow away this row, and then the change is reverted. With newer versions of FootPrints, it's not that bad anymore, because now when you add extra columns, they will show up. So it's not as bad anymore. However, we had designed something maybe 2 or so years ago to help with that. So even today, hey, you want to restore someone's like UI, you want to remove all the customizations, basically you come to the database. And as much as I'm an advocate for you should not be afraid for the database, you should learn the database. I've built data models, things like that. I want to make it easier for you guys as well, because you might not even have access to the database, right? Your organization's permissions might restrict you from having access to RDP to the server or to SQL Studio Manager into the database and things like that. So I've built into the UI, again, under my additional administration. I showed you the broadcast one earlier. Now I have customized UI. And I can see here, hey, Roy customized saved search my open work. Well, saved search my open work. And I can see that the administrator customized console administration, which is this one here. So I can see who's made what changes. And then if I want to revert those changes, it's just a matter of clicking on that and boop, delete. Now, especially for a console, this was a console I deleted. I should have to switch portals to see the change. I'm going to be lazy and just log out and log back in. But you can see my administration console is back to what it was. My main is there, my buttons are there. If I click customize, that restore button is gone. If I go to the database and I run this again, that last row is gone. So it's essentially just giving you a way to interact with the database to keep things clean, but doing it from the UI. Similarly, I can revert the change that Roy did here. So I can take this one here, which again, this was making the title column wider. So if I hit refresh here, nothing changes. So I go ahead and delete this. Now that row in the database here is gone, that row 108 that was here is gone. And so if Roy refreshes now, title goes back to what it was. And then I can expand it again if I want to, and come back over here and refresh, and then I'll have 109. So all about making life of the administrator easier. Quick segue here. I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the ideas, that one that I couldn't grab, new transfer personal reports and searches. So again, built something very similar for that. So I have, well, not for the reports, but I did it for the saved searches. So I have saved searches over here. This is showing me a list of all the saved searches in the system. So 91 records over here. If I were to actually look at my saved searches, I see 91 as well. However, if I come here as another user and I create a private saved search, my private search, I can spell my private search. So private, right? Not shared. And I'm just going to make this real quick here. I'm just going to go service desk incident, search for pro tip here. If ever you want to do a saved search and you want to show all tickets, unlike business rules where criteria is optional, a search for here is required. If I leave this blank, it will give me an error. So there's a couple different ways you can go around this. What I like to do is common record number is any value, because there's no such thing as a ticket that doesn't have a ticket number. So this essentially is me seeing everything. Sure, I'll just toss that in. Okay, so save and close. All right, so now I have a user that has created a private saved search. Can't sort on that. And it's hidden somewhere. There it is, right here. Now, if I go back to the administrator and refresh over here, I can still only see 91 searches, because that's what I mentioned earlier, right? Administrators cannot see the private ones. However, in our saved search functionality over here, so I have 91. If I refresh this, I now have 92. And at some point, I will get to the private one. There it is. So now here I can see it. And limited capability to edit, basically, hey, I flip this over to shared. Save that. And if I go back to my managed searches over here, which showed me 91 before, and I refresh, now it shows me 92. So again, just making things easier, giving the administrator the capabilities to do more than what the system allows without having to resort to diving into the database. Again, if any of this piques your interest and you would like to have that within your own environment, feel free to get in contact with us. All right, and then the last topic for today is types of business rules. And this one's a little bit of a lighthearted topic. I always cover this as part of my training because it can be confusing. It can legitimately be confusing. And essentially, the answer I had gotten from BMC 6, 7, 8 years ago, when version 12 first came out, was that was by design. They had a very different philosophy back then when they first redesigned FootPrints 12. Is they had really hoped that FootPrints would be able to be used by any regular IT Joe without any kind of specialized knowledge or training, that you'd be able to install FootPrints, to build your environment from the ground up, and to maintain it without training or prior experience. Now, that's essentially false. The standard administrator training for FootPrints, same thing with the old versions of FootPrints 11 and prior, depending on which curriculum you look at, is either a 4-day course or a 5-day course. So of course, you can't just kind of pick it up on your own here. So they did some elements of the UI with that, and one of those were business rules. So if I go into my business rules list here, if I do a new business rule here, I have all these different types of rules that I can create. Now, if there's any of you guys on the webinar right now, which I've trained, you're probably chuckling a little bit. You know exactly where this is going. I like to pose this as a trick question when I'm doing training. How many types of business rules are there? And the answer is there's only 2 types of business rules: on-screen rules and after save rules. Everything else in this list should be ignored, should never be used. Everything in this list here is essentially a subset of one of these 2. And so what I mean by that is, if I click, for example, email notification rule, I'm going to click on this one here. You can see the business rule type, email notification, as opposed to like after save or on screen. If I go down to my actions over here, I only have the one action that's available to me: send email to. Now, of course, I can add multiple of those actions, but that's the only thing I can do with this one. So if I create a business rule, let's say I have a use case, when the ticket is created, send an email. Okay, sure. So I'm going to do, after save, on create. I'm not going to put a criteria, or, sure, I'll do like status equals to not equal to close or something like that. Status not equal to completed, closed, or archived. Why not? Send an email to n@n.nn. Perfect. It's working. Now all of a sudden there's a requirement to, yeah, but you know what? When this happens, I also want you to, I don't know, silly example here. I want you to change the priority to 6. Sure, no problem. I'll just come in here and I'm going to do a set field value. Right? The action set field value. Except that you can't, because you chose email notification. You are locked in to email notification. So now at this point, you can either create a second rule to do that, and now you have 2 rules where you could only need 1, or what I would recommend is you delete this rule, you recreate it as an after save rule, which still gives you the same functionality, but gives you all the other functionality as well. So now when I hit the drop down here, right, I still have send email to, and all the same capabilities are there, but I also have all these other things that I can do. And that's true of any of these options here, right? All of these ones here limit you to the functionality to which they were kind of designed for. Now, the reason this was done this way, like I kind of started mentioning, is in the original philosophy, and I mean, to be fair, the rewrite of FootPrints started before even BMC bought it, when it was still Numera. So maybe this was a Numera thing, doesn't really matter who it was, but the idea was, well, hey, if I'm the administrator and I want to send an email, do I do this one? Do I do that? I have no clue. Oh yeah, this sounds right. So I'm going to use this. So that was the original intent. But like I said, and I've shown it limits you to certain functionalities. So definitely strongly recommend avoiding those here, because they really give you no advantage. There is another business rule type as well that's kind of hidden. You don't see it in this list here, but you might work with it quite often. I'm going to go into change management. Go to workflows, normal. So approval processes. When you create an approval process, by default, it'll create business rules automatically for you. And those rules will be approval type business rules. Now, I don't know if I had actually rejigged these or not. Yeah, no. See, it's an approval type of business rule. This one here isn't as bad because it doesn't limit you in terms of what you can do with actions like the other ones did. So for the most part, I let this one slide because I have to be lazy sometimes. So I don't bother deleting and recreating this rule because all the functionality is there. So there's no reason to really redo those ones. But outside of that specific example within a workflow, try to avoid the other ones. Okay, so that pretty much covers the topics I had for today. So I do see one question in the chat. I'm going to take a couple seconds here to read it and answer it. But just to recap as well, so once this session here ends, it takes us a couple days here. My marketing guy basically takes this recording, spruces it up a little bit. It will be live on our website, rgrinovations.com/webinars. So you can see the recording of this session as well as the 5 prior sessions that we've done. And we have a couple other things. There was a demo we did back in 2020 of the FootPrints Advanced Starter template. If that piques your interest, you can see that there. I believe there's also a couple demos on Trackit, things like that. When you leave the webinar today, you should be getting an automated email to complete a survey. I would very much appreciate if you did complete it and answer it honestly. Let us know, how we're doing, what topics are of interest to you. The survey will also have a link to sign up for the next session, and invites for the next session will also go out sometime next week. Okay, so, and just quickly, sorry, bear with me while I just read this question here. Also an agent. Okay, so the question was on broadcasts. You want to send them to administrator and agent, but not customer. I'd have to test that scenario, but I believe you would need 2 separate actions, one that goes to administrator, one that goes to agents, because although normally an administrator is an agent, I believe in this context here, it is treated separately because the administrator flag in a workspace role is treated separately. So if I go into one of my workspaces, for example, this administrator one, sure. There is what makes this an administrator beyond just agent is a separate flag. So I can't say for sure because I haven't personally tested this one, but I would expect that it is checking for this flag. So if this flag is yes, that's an administrator. If this flag is no, that's an agent. And then if it's customer, it's customer. Sorry, another question here came in. There is a possibility. Yes. So question was, can you set the created by using field variables in an email? You should be able to do that. I know there was problems in the past where in some versions that stopped working. Again, to be honest, I haven't tested it lately. I'd have to test it again, but you should be able to do, created by equals and then populate it, and it should take that. All right. So yeah, no other questions come in. You know what? And I might even try for next month's webinar. I might allocate a couple minutes at the end for a little bit of a Q&A. I did that once before. So I'll probably do that again for the next one. So definitely, if you guys do have some questions, feel free to keep them forward for next month's webinar. Or, of course, if you want to contact me in the interim and chat about them, we can absolutely do that as well. So that's going to be the end of this month's session. I hope you guys enjoyed it and learned a couple things, and have a great rest of your day.